Hi everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. Now, we're going to do a breakdown of Episode 3 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show. It's currently streaming on Prime Video. The first 3 episodes came out last Friday. The 4th one comes out this Friday, and let's face it, this is probably my favorite of the 3 episodes so far. So we're going to talk about a bunch of the different scenes in here. We're going to break them down, talk about the ebb and flow of the episode, as well as highlight a lot of the differences between the books and the show, and where they took inspiration from for some of these scenes. If you're new to the channel, make sure you click the subscribe button and the notification bell. I usually put out 2, sometimes 3 videos per day now, all related to Wheel of Time content. Now, before we get into the video, spoiler warning. In this video, we're going to talk about certain elements of Episode 3 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show. So if you haven't seen that episode, I'm going to ruin it for you. Also, if you haven't read at least the very first book of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series, that's The Eye of the World, be forewarned, I'm going to spoil a bunch of elements from that book as well. Alright. All that being said, let's get on to the video. Alright, we start out with this scene here. It's the opening scene, and it's a Trolloc in a cave looking for Nynaeve. Now, he dragged her away by the hair at the end of the last episode, and she basically is hiding in the same spot that we've seen the promotional material show Egwene come out of the pool with all of that dye all over her. Now, this Trolloc kind of looks around for her, and you can tell that he can't really find her, but he knows he's there. So we're going to talk just a bit about this scene. Now, Trollocs in general in the book series have heightened senses of sight, smell. They can smell humans just like a dog could. They can see in the dark as well as any other animal. And so far we haven't really seen that just yet in the show. We see Trollocs carrying torches and stuff, so that is a change. Now, I do want to mention that this particular cold open scene is absolutely amazing. This goes on. Nynaeve basically kills him with his own belt knife, and then the water forms up in the shape of the dragon's fang with the blood of the Trolloc. Really, really very powerful, neat, really great opening scene. However, not something we see in the book series whatsoever. So the change here is the fact that Nynaeve essentially meets up with everyone in Berlin in an inn and then tags along with the group from there before they hit Shadar Logoth. Now, we do know that in the series at this point, they've already surpassed Shadar Logoth. This is the episode where they split up. So that is a major change from the series. However, what they're highlighting here is the fact that Nynaeve is very capable with her hands, and she is a bit of a badass. Alright, so this scene here has Perrin and Egwene on the run after they get out of the river from Shadar Logoth, and essentially, they're freezing, there's wolves after them, they're very scared, and Perrin's trying to start a fire. Then, Egwene magics one up using the one power. So, this particular scene is pretty powerful for a couple of different reasons. One, it's a nod to the book readers, basically because this scene doesn't happen in the books. Not in the way it does here. This showcases the fact that Egwene can use the power after her and Moiraine have basically talked about it, and she's been shown that it's possible. But when they're split up in the book series, Egwene is by herself initially for the first night. She starts a fire on her own. She has a fire going when Perrin shows up. They eat, they have a good time, and then later on, Perrin finds out she used the one power and is very uncomfortable by it. She can't do it again, however, to start a fire while they're together, but this is a little bit different. He's basically shown he's accepting of it almost immediately, and she does it right in front of him. So that is a little bit different than the book series here. Although a really great scene to explain that she does have the power to non-book readers, and the fact that she can use it at this point in the series. Alright, so the next scene basically showcases Nynaeve's healing talent. We know she's a wisdom, we know she heals people, although we haven't really seen it, so to speak, on the screen yet. Now, in this scene here, it's quite a bit different from the books, but essentially she catches up with Lan and Moiraine, and then Lan asks her to heal Moiraine if she wants to help her friends. So she gets all of the herbs she needs from the wilderness, and then she kind of mashes them together with her herb belt, like her herb pouch, uses all her little tools, and then she uses it to make a poultice to make Moiraine feel a little bit better. Now, in this particular scene, it's quite a bit different from the books. So like I said before, she never actually uses the herbs to heal Moraine's wounds, although she does make her a concoction to make her less tired. Because while they're on the road together, Moiraine is using all of her power and her strength to use the one power to keep fatigue from the horses, to keep fatigue from the Emond's Fielders. She doesn't do it for Lan because he's a warder and doesn't need it, but she's getting very tired herself, and Nynaeve basically makes Moiraine concoction. So this is sort of a parallel to that because she's healing her at this point, and it goes to show that she doesn't really trust the Aes Sedai, but she is still willing to help people as a wisdom and heal them. Next, we have a dream. In this dream, Perrin basically dreams of his wife, Lila. Now, Lila is there and she's being eaten by a wolf. It's kind of scary. It's kind of off-putting. And the people watching the show who haven't read the book series before may not understand the importance of dreams, although in the Wheel of Time, the dream world is a real place, and essentially worse things can happen to you there than in the real world. Now, this is sort of a parallel to all the dreams the boys have during the first book, and although this particular scene doesn't take place in the book series, because let's face it, he's not married in the series and he doesn't dream about his wife ever, and he doesn't really start dreaming about wolves until much later, I think they're starting to accelerate that fact. I think they're starting to introduce to people that the wolf dream is a thing, and that wolves can protect him in the dream. Now, in my Easter egg video, there's a bunch of Easter eggs to unpack in this particular scene. I'm not going to go through them here, but make sure you watch that video, because there's a bunch of little stuff that I noticed watching this. Alright, so now we have Rand and Matt in Breen Spring, and we get our first look in the series at Thom, Maryland. Now, this is a scene that doesn't really happen in the books whatsoever, although it's an amalgam of a whole bunch of different stuff all kind of crammed together, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But this was a really, in my opinion, haunting scene. I love the song he sang. It was absolutely fantastic. And a really, really great scene between Rand and Matt. You get to really hear how they talk to each other. You get to see the taint on the dagger affecting Matt. There's a lot of things going on here. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the book series and the show here. Essentially, they don't meet Thom on the road. Thom comes with them from Emond's Field. He's invited there for Beltane to perform. He tags along with them and he leaves because he recognizes Moiraine for who she is, and at that point you don't really know why, but he decides to go with them. He's with them right up until Shadar Logoth when they get split up. Then he's with Matt and Rand. After that point, they ended up running away from the Trollocs, getting on a riverboat, the Spray, and then going upriver to Whitebridge. Now, in Whitebridge, Thom does get attacked by a Fade. He defends the two boys, Rand and Matt, from the Fade, and essentially, at that point, you think he dies, but he does come back on later in the series. Remember, I said spoiler warning up until book 14. So, this whole scene is sort of an amalgam of when they first meet Thom in the Two Rivers, and he's doing some juggling and stuff like that, because they're introducing him performing, so you know he's a performer. It's also an amalgam of a scene in the books from Four Kings. Now, Four Kings is a town in which Rand first channels the One Power. Now, this particular entire scene here, where they're in the town, kind of pulls from a bunch of different little spots in the books. So you get to meet a dark friend they see on the road. You get to see Rand channel One Power for the first time, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And you get to meet Thom Maryland for the first time. They also kind of cram in some stuff that happened in later books when a Nae'blis is in a cage, Gull, and Perrin basically helps him out and brings him down and fights off a bunch of White Cloaks. Sort of, kind of. There's a bunch of little nods and Easter eggs in these particular scenes that I'll cover in my Easter egg videos. But at this point, these are pulling inspiration from different spots in the books to make this one scene, rather than perhaps doing 5 or 6 different full scenes. Alright, now we cut back to Perrin and Egwene, and essentially the wolves have herded them like sheep up this path, follow these cart tracks, and they meet these people. Now, these people come out of the mist, and this is, I'm not going to lie to you, a very super creepy, weird scene. These people come out of the mist, sort of like The Hills Have Eyes, and they're like, do you know the song? For people who haven't read the books before, it can be a little confusing what's going on here, but essentially, this is very different from the book series. So in the book series, Perrin and Egwene meet a man called Elias on the road. That man can speak with the wolves. He has golden eyes, and he talks with them with his mind, just like you would talk back and forth with me. He tells Perrin he can do the same thing, and as they're traveling along the road, he veers off to the side to meet this band of Tinkers. Now, this whole scene here where they're talking about the opening and the words that they're supposed to say seemed a little strange to me and a little forced, but the gentleman that came forward with Ram, their grandson, he told them what to say. They said the words that they didn't know the song, and then they were invited back to their camp. Now, in the book series, Elias knew that because he had met these people before and knew them, and they spent a few days with them resting, relaxing, eating, dancing, singing, and having a good time. So yes, Perrin and Egwene do meet the Tinkers. Yes, that particular phrase is there and introduced to people because it's a very important phrase to the Tinkers, although it seemed a little forced maybe because Elias wasn't there to bridge that gap. Although, even though there are some changes, they still are with the Tinkers at this point, and Perrin, although he doesn't really know he can talk to the wolves, I think at this point he sort of suspects a little bit. Alright, we're going to talk about this scene now. This scene, again, doesn't happen in the books, but it's a good exposition dump. Essentially, Thom catches Matt trying to cut down an Aiel. Now, when he's going to cut down this Aiel, essentially, Matt's whole reason for doing this is he's going to rob the dead body. He wants to take the money he has, that big amethyst, I believe it's an amethyst, because he's trying to get money to go back home to see his sisters. Now again, this is sort of the dagger working on him, I believe, at this point, because I don't think Matt would actually rob a dead body and loot them. But at this point, Thom comes out, and there is sort of an explanation. They talk about who the Aiel are, what they are, what's going on, and a little bit about Matt and Thom's motivations. So again, this is not a scene that's seen in the books. It's maybe sort of inspired by that scene where Perrin rescues Goal, but I don't know 100% if that's exactly the case. But it is a really good way of explaining certain things, especially about the Aiel, to the viewer. Now we have a scene with Dana, the Dark Friend, and Rand. Rand's essentially trapped in a room with her. She has his sword, and he's trying to break down a door. Now, she basically tells him there's no way that any man can break down that door because it's made of ironwood, and then the screen starts to shake a bit, sort of Dragon Ball Z-ish, and he's slamming into it, and boom, he breaks the door down. This doesn't exactly play out this way in the books. So Dana is not really a character in the books, but she is taking the place of a couple of different people. So we have a Dark Friend that Matt and Rand met on the road that they ended up killing, which kind of happens here because Dana does die, although Thom kills her. And we also have a scene in Four Kings. Now, Four Kings is a town that Rand stops in where he channels, I believe consciously, I should say, for the first time. He did it before when he basically washed away Bella's tiredness on their escape from Emond's Field towards Terran Ferry. But this is the first time when the readers really are thrown into it. He calls lightning down and busts open a room. So essentially, him and Matt stop. They play the flute. They juggle for a bit. They tell some stories, and they get room and board for the night. They're put in a back storeroom like this, basically where they can't get out. The door is locked, and there's bars in the windows. There's a lot of lightning and rain outside at the time, and Rand and Matt try to pry open the bars and the windows. And when they can't, and the innkeeper and his cronies try to get in, which sort of Dana is sort of playing them, Rand gets really excited, really scared. He calls down lightning and blasts open basically the window on the side of the door. He kills the innkeeper. He kills, some of his cronies and toughs, and then they escape that way. And at that point, they're blinded, or Matt's blinded and has to wear a bandana over his eyes from the big flash of light. So it's sort of cool. It's sort of awesome. This is a little bit different. At this point, I think they're showcasing Rand using the power by busting down the door. It's a lot less in your face, a lot more subtle. So these scenes in this town, they're drawing inspiration from a lot of different places within the book to make this one scene. Now, if they went word for word, just like a straight book to screen port, we'd have maybe a couple of episodes doing this stuff. Instead, they cut it all down, they mashed it all together, and they crammed it into this one village rather than stopping at a bunch of different villages, and they're showcasing all that all together. Now, later on, Dana does die after chasing them through the town, but she dies by Thom's hand, not Matt and Rand's hand. So, again, a little bit different, maintains her innocence maybe just a little bit longer. Now, the final scene of the episode is this. An injured Moiraine, Lan, and Nynaeve basically travel to meet other Aes Sedai. We see Liandrin here. We're going to stop right there. And a bunch of other sisters in the background. And they say they've captured a man claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. And that man happens to be Logan. Now, Logan is not a huge part of the books, at least in the first bit. He comes into play much later on after he's gentled. And other things happen. I know I gave a Memory Flight spoiler warning, but I'm not going to ruin exactly what happens with him because it is an interesting part of the story. So none of this happens in the books. So we don't see any of this at all. This is all completely new. And I think this is a way to bypass Caemlyn and get them to Tar Valon in an active manner while still explaining how the Gentling works, who false dragons are, how men who use the One Power basically can proclaim themselves to be a dragon. And then in the next episode, we know we're going to see Logain's armies attacking the encampment from a bunch of leaks and stuff that I covered in my news video that just came out. If you haven't watched that, go watch that right now. It's fantastic. So again, none of this happens in the books. However, it does explain a lot of things to the viewers that we don't know at this point. If you haven't read the book series, you don't really know much about false dragons. You don't really know much about men channeling. You don't really know a whole lot about what the Aes Sedai do. All you know at this point is that Moiraine's going to get healed by her sisters, and I think you're going to see in the next episode some tension between the different factions, and I'll start to explain that a bit better too. All right, so I want to hear your thoughts down below in the description box. What did you think of this episode? Personally, it's my favorite. I really liked it. Yes, very different than the books, big changes. However, I thought all of the changes worked as an adaptation, and it was able to draw from a bunch of different inspirations and elements and bring it together in the screen for non-book readers to understand and progress the story in a great way while the characters still had fantastic interaction. All right. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought, and thank you so much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.